Story 1. He sent me photos of my room, but took them from angles that shouldn't exist. This happened to me in the fall of 2018. At the time, I was living in a studio apartment just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. I'd moved there after college for a publishing internship that eventually turned into a full-time job, and this place was all I could afford on my own. It wasn't anything special. Second floor, one big room, cheap carpet, and a single window that faced a brick wall. But it was mine. And it was safe, or so I thought. Most nights, I followed the same routine. I'd work late, come home around 7, make some cheap dinner, and read for a while before crashing on my futon. I rarely had visitors. My family was out of state. I didn't know many people in town. That part didn't bother me. In fact, I liked it. I had control over my space. It started with a letter. There was no envelope, just a single sheet of lined paper folded in thirds and slipped under my door. It wasn't typed. It wasn't even addressed to me. It just said, "Nice place. Bet it looks better from above." At first, I thought it was a prank, some drunk neighbor or a bored teenager. But it stayed in my mind. The phrasing, the way the letters leaned left, like they'd been written by someone writing with the wrong hand. The next night, I found a small manila envelope tucked behind the pipe under my kitchen sink. I wasn't looking for anything. I'd dropped a fork. When I bent down to get it, I noticed the flap. No name, no writing, just the envelope taped lightly behind the U-bend. I opened it slowly. Inside were 4 photographs. All of them were of my apartment. My bed, the kitchenette, my bookshelf, taken from high, unnatural angles. It was like someone had somehow gotten to the ceiling and shot downward, but there was no ladder, no crawl space, no vantage point to explain it. The strangest one was of me sleeping. In the picture, I was lying on my back, head turned toward the ceiling, but I don't sleep like that. Never have. I'm a side sleeper, always facing the wall. I even checked my phone's sleep tracker that night. It confirmed it. My longest REM cycle was logged with side position breathing. I don't remember ever lying like that. And yet there I was, pale face up, mouth slightly open, eyes shut, stiff. It made me question more than just the photo. It made me question my own memory, my own body. If someone could capture me in a way that contradicted how I live, how I exist, then what else was I wrong about? I told myself it was edited, some freak with access to Photoshop. But the shadows were too precise. The folds in my blanket were exact. The clock on my bedside table said 2:41 a.m., and I remembered waking around that time with the odd sensation of light against my eyelids. I thought it was a passing car. Now I'm not so sure. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay still, all lights on, eyes wide. The next morning, I taped the vent in the ceiling shut and placed my phone in every corner, recording. I even tried to call the building manager, but it went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to say. By the 3rd day, I stopped checking behind furniture, because every time I did, I found something else, a new envelope under the radiator. 2 photos, one of my open fridge taken from inside it, and one of my face reflected in the microwave door, mid-yawn. But I hadn't used the microwave that day. Not once. The angles weren't possible. I started to feel dizzy whenever I looked at the images. Not just mentally, physically, my balance would shift, my stomach would knot up. It was like the photographs were warping not just my trust, but my orientation. Like they didn't just document, they disoriented. That's when I started doubting myself, not in the dramatic movie way, but subtly, quietly. I misplaced my keys and wondered if someone had moved them. I woke up hungry and wasn't sure if I'd eaten the day before. My routine began to unravel, not because anything major changed, but because I no longer trusted what had happened. If someone can show you a version of your own life that doesn't match what you remember, who do you believe? By the end of that week, I couldn't even trust my own reflection, because in one of the last photos, there was a mirror, and the person in it wasn't me, or at least not completely. I didn't want to look at the photos anymore, but I couldn't stop. Each day there was a new envelope, always hidden, always in a place I'd only find by accident, tucked in the crease of my bed frame or slipped behind the soap dish in the bathroom. I started to wonder if they'd all been placed at once, or if someone was entering while I was gone, or worse, while I was home. At first, the photos seemed mundane. My bookshelf, my shoes by the door, my reflection in the microwave again. But when I looked closer, I noticed something off. In the photo of my bed, there was a faint shadow beside the mattress. Not mine, taller. The silhouette was distorted, just slightly transparent, like a smudge on glass. But it had form, a bent shoulder, an arm, a knee too high, as if crouched. In the next photo, one of the kitchen, there it was again. This time near the table, blurred, elongated, just close enough to be visible if you were looking for it. Too subtle to see at first glance. But once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. I started marking the photos with a pen, circling the shapes. They moved around the apartment like someone pacing, watching, always just at the edge of the frame. In one image, the thing was beside the bathroom sink. My towel was folded, but the shadow's hand wasn't holding it. It was just hovering, bent at the wrist. Every photo had something wrong with the light. Not obviously, not like a horror movie with flickering bulbs or red hues. Just slight inconsistencies, shadows where there shouldn't be, angles that didn't match the lamps I owned. In one picture, my overhead light was off, but the floor was lit. There was no lamp in sight, and yet the light fell clearly across the floorboards, and so did a long, warped shadow, thin and crooked, like someone standing just out of frame, leaning in. I started to obsess over light. During the day, I'd sit still and watch how it moved across the room, just to understand it, to remind myself what was possible. But in the photos, none of the shadows aligned with real objects. They knew something I didn't, and then came the worst one. It was a picture of me brushing my teeth, taken from behind in the bathroom mirror, but the reflection didn't show a second person. Instead, it showed a shadow behind me, but in the reflection only. Not in the real bathroom, not on the floor tiles. That broke me. How can a shadow be visible in a mirror, but not in the room? How can light register something that you can't see? I took all the photos to a print shop and asked them to verify if they were manipulated. The guy looked at me like I was paranoid. "They look analog," he said. "Film stock, probably a 35mm, old school." I asked about the distortions. Could be a dirty lens, could be a trick of the light, could be, but wasn't. I stopped sleeping again. At night, I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. I kept thinking about that first photo, the one where I was asleep on my back. What if I'd been made to lie that way? What if I'd never woken up naturally that night, just repositioned, like a doll? Every sound became suspect. A car passing, a pipe hissing, the hum of the refrigerator. I unplugged every appliance, slept with the lights on. Nothing helped, because the shadows in the photos weren't caused by lights. They were caused by presence. I started researching cases, not ghost stories. I avoided those. I was looking for real reports, psychological studies, medical anomalies, anything to explain what was happening without descending into fantasy. I found a forum for people dealing with stalkers, and in one thread, buried deep, someone had posted about angle-less intrusions. It wasn't a term I recognized, but the description caught me. They described finding surveillance photos of themselves, taken from impossible positions, above ceiling fans, behind headboards, through solid walls. One user claimed the images were generated by micro-drones. Others said endoscopic cameras, woven into vents or light fixtures. But some argued that it wasn't technology at all, that it was psychological, that the photos were staged in a way to make you question space itself. "If you can't trust your angle," one user wrote, "you can't trust your perception." That's what had been happening to me. The photos didn't just show things. They suggested I'd misunderstood my own life, that I had blind spots, even in places I considered familiar. Then came the last envelope. It was different, black, thick, taped to the back of my toilet tank. I don't know how long it had been there. Inside was a single item, a mirror, about the size of a postcard, cracked down the center. And on the back, someone had written, "You've never really seen your own room." I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, just holding it. I didn't move, didn't cry, just sat. Because deep down, I understood what it meant. All those angles I thought were mine, where I read, where I slept, where I felt alone, had never belonged to me. Someone had always been watching. Maybe not always, but long enough. They hadn't broken in. They hadn't hurt me. They didn't need to. All they did was show me my life from the outside. I moved out 2 days later, left the furniture, took nothing but my clothes and a few books. I still don't know how they got those photos. I don't think I ever will. But every time I move into a new place now, the first thing I do is take a picture of the ceiling, just to remind myself where the top is. And even now, I'm never sure what will be in the corner of the frame. Story 2. He knew everything I said, even when my phone was off. This happened in 2021, during the second year of my graduate program in Portland. I was living in a converted basement apartment in a house that had been split into 3 units. The upstairs was an older couple. The attic was a rotating cast of art students. My space was the lowest, partially underground with low ceilings and the kind of humidity you could feel behind your eyes. At first, it was perfect, quiet, cheap. A 10-minute walk to campus, the kind of place no one would ever think to visit unless they were looking for it, and which I liked. I spent most nights reading, annotating, or listening to music while pacing the kitchen. I wasn't social. I'd broken things off with someone a few months prior, messy, obsessive, way too fast. I needed silence, I needed recovery, but silence doesn't last. The first time it happened, I was singing quietly to myself in the shower, something I only did when I was absolutely sure no one was around. Midway through the second verse, I heard the line repeated, faint, like an echo. It wasn't a delay, it was too precise, too intentional, a whisper that mirrored me exactly, one syllable behind. I froze, rinsed, dressed in silence. It happened again 2 nights later. This time, I was reading aloud, something I did to process dense texts. My voice was low, rhythmic. The room was still. Then, just as I finished a sentence, I heard it repeated. From the wall behind me, I told myself it was bleed-through from the upstairs unit. Maybe the couple had their TV on, and the timing was just coincidence. But the voice was mine. Same inflection, same breath. It kept happening. I stopped talking out loud. I started writing notes to myself instead. Grocery lists, to-do items, a way to occupy the inner dialogue without vocalizing anything. It didn't help. One night I was messaging a friend, complaining about an argument with a professor. I typed, "He treats me like I'm stupid." 5 seconds later, a notification popped up from an anonymous number. "You're not stupid. He's just afraid of you." No contact, no name, no emoji, just that. I turned off my phone completely, pulled the battery, left it in a drawer. I didn't use any smart devices, no assistant, no camera, no microphone. I even unplugged the router. And yet the next morning there was a post-it on my desk. Same handwriting. "You were right not to say it out loud." At that point I stopped using my voice entirely, not just at home, in class too. I'd whisper answers if I had to, avoid calls, let everything go to voicemail. I told people I was sick. My professor thought it was a psychological phase. He wasn't entirely wrong, because something happens when you start to believe your voice isn't private. You begin to disassociate from it. At first, I'd find myself forgetting words mid-sentence, not because I didn't know them, but because the risk of speaking outweighed the need to finish. Eventually, I stopped forming complete thoughts altogether. I remember walking to the store and stopping halfway because I couldn't remember what I was supposed to buy, even though I had a list in my pocket. I was so used to vocalizing my thoughts that I'd trained myself out of internal coherence. It's hard to describe what that feels like. Like something is leaking out of you all the time. Like the act of thinking is no longer enclosed. My sense of mental privacy had rotted. That's when the dream started. Long, heavy sequences of myself speaking to someone through a wall. Only I couldn't hear them. I could only hear myself, repeating everything they told me to say, over and over, until I woke up with a sore throat. The worst part was that it never felt malevolent. It felt familiar, like someone who knew me better than I did. A few weeks after I stopped speaking altogether, I started receiving emails. I only used one account, a secure university domain that required two-factor authentication. But one morning, when I opened my laptop, there were 3 new messages, all from the same address. relay.ghost@senderoprotonmail.com. No subject, no message body, just an attachment in each. I opened the first one. It was a sound file, WAV format, roughly 30 seconds long. It began with soft ambient noise, the low hum of a fridge, maybe a car passing outside. Then, a voice, my voice. Not just similar, identical, same tempo, same breath cadence. And I was saying, she's here again. She knows I hear her, but it's okay. Let her in. I stopped the audio halfway through. I felt sick. I don't sleep talk. I've recorded myself before, years ago, out of curiosity. Nothing. But even if I had, how would someone get that? My laptop was password protected. My phone had been off for weeks. My apartment had no open devices, no smart tech, no assistant, no voice-activated anything. I opened the second file. This time it was longer. A full minute. It began the same way. Background noise, then my voice. She's waiting in the space between. If I say it right, she gets closer. Let her back in. I closed the file and deleted the email. Deleted all 3. Emptied my trash. Disconnected from Wi-Fi. But later that night, the third recording downloaded itself again, this time directly onto my desktop. I didn't click it. Instead, I plugged in my external hard drive, backed up every file I could, and shut everything down. I slept on the floor that night, by the door, lights on. The next morning, there was a printout under the door, plain white paper, ink slightly smudged. It said, "Even when you sleep, you speak. Even when you don't, you transmit." I checked every inch of my apartment. Every socket, every vent, every crack in the foundation, nothing. And then one of the upstairs tenants moved out. She left a note with the landlord, which somehow ended up taped to the hallway door. It said, "Something about the walls down there carries sound weird. Sometimes I hear myself from below." After that, I bought a field recorder, one of those old analog models with tape spools and manual reels. I left it on overnight. No Wi-Fi, no power grid, just a sealed box of magnetics. The next morning, I played it back. It was mostly static, then footsteps, then me, talking in my sleep again, repeating the same phrases from the emails. But right at the end, there was a second voice, faint, like breath through a crack. It whispered, "Say it again." I left the apartment 2 weeks later. Moved without telling anyone except my advisor. New city, new lease, new job. I even changed my name on social media, got a new number, used cash for everything. I picked a small, quiet unit on the 3rd floor of a brick walk-up. No shared walls, no basement. I didn't tell the landlord anything about my past, just that I needed peace. He didn't ask questions. The first few nights were normal. I slept better, ate better. I even started speaking again, slowly, practicing my voice in the mirror like it was a foreign language. But on the 4th night, something changed. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the sound of tapping. Not on the wall, not the window, inside the room, on the table, steady, rhythmic, like a finger rapping against the wood. I turned on the light. Nothing there. The sound stopped immediately. I checked the time. 3:12 a.m. I knew that time. In one of the recordings, maybe the second one, I'd whispered something near the end, something soft, almost inaudible. She's gone now. The timestamp on that file? 3:12 a.m. Coincidence? Maybe. But the next night, the tapping came back. Same time. And the night after that. And then something else started happening. All the clocks in the apartment, my phone, my microwave, even a wristwatch I kept in a drawer, began resetting themselves, always to 3:12 a.m. At first, I thought it was a glitch, some syncing issue. But when I removed the batteries and reset them manually, the change still happened. They weren't broken. They were being told. I spoke to no one about it. I deleted all my accounts. No voicemail, no email. I even got a physical mailbox at a shipping center to avoid receiving anything directly. Still, the recordings resumed. But this time, it wasn't my voice. It was hers. Not a real person. A composite. A mimicry. She spoke with my mother's cadence, my ex's phrasing, my professor's inflection. She said, "I'm still between the words. Every time you speak, you give me shape." I stopped speaking again. Then the letters returned, not mailed, just placed, sometimes under my pillow, sometimes inside my jacket pocket, all of them in the same slanted offhand writing. The last one was just a single line. "She's never left. You've just stopped listening." I don't know if this was a person, a network, a pattern. I only know that it changed the way I think, the way I listen, the way I exist in sound. I keep everything unplugged now. I check every object for seams. But when the room goes still, when the fridge hums quiet and the outside traffic fades, I still hear it. Faint from within the walls. My own voice saying things I never said. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. I found my face on a stranger's phone, but I've never met him. This happened to me in 2022. I was working remotely at the time, doing contract design work for a non-profit. Most of my day was spent in a small cafe on the east end of town. They had decent Wi-Fi and strong coffee, and I liked that I could blend in. Just another person behind a screen. It started on a Thursday. Late afternoon, the cafe was half empty. I had my headphones on, editing a layout, when I noticed someone sitting across from me. Not directly across, more diagonally, at one of the corner tables. He wasn't working, just staring at his phone. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except I saw the flash, just barely, a reflection in the glass of the window behind him, like a camera capturing a screen. I glanced up. He looked down quickly. I figured I was being paranoid. But as I packed up to leave, I passed behind him, and that's when I saw it. He was scrolling through photos, a gallery grid, dozens of them. They were all of me, not just selfies. These were candid, walking into the cafe, seated at different tables looking out the window. But they weren't from that day. The lighting was different. My hair was in a style I hadn't worn in over a year. One image showed me in a denim jacket I gave away last spring. I stopped. I didn't say anything. Just froze behind him. The man must have sensed me. He quickly locked the screen and stood up. He didn't run, didn't say a word, just brushed past me and left. I didn't follow. Instead, I stood there, stunned. For a second, I thought maybe I was wrong, that I'd misread it. But I remembered the image too clearly. The one with me holding a paper coffee cup with my initials on the lid, standing outside a building I didn't recognize. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything. His face, the photos, how calm he looked, how carefully staged those images were, the framing, the angles, they weren't accidental, they were curated. The next morning I went back to the cafe and asked the barista if she knew the guy. She said no, said she hadn't seen him before, but as I turned to leave, she added, "He was here yesterday though. He asked what your name was, said you dropped something." I never spoke to him, never made eye contact, never left anything behind. I checked my bag just to be sure. Everything was there. Later that afternoon, I opened my own phone and scrolled through my photo archive. Some of the photos were there, except I don't remember taking them. One image showed me sitting on my own bed, facing away from the camera. My hands were in my lap, like I was waiting for something. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago, 4:07 a.m. But I'd been asleep then. I was sure of it. Another photo showed me brushing my teeth from the hallway. I live alone. I told myself I'd forgotten that I'd set up the timer for some reason, but there was no metadata, no camera used, just a .jpg with no origin. That was when I realized what disturbed me most. It wasn't the photos, it was how convincing they were. Whoever took them, whoever staged them, knew exactly how I moved, how I held my arms when I was tired, how I stood when I was lost in thought. They weren't just pictures of me, they were impressions of me, and I couldn't tell which ones were mine. I brought the images into Lightroom, hoping to check the metadata, GPS tags, timestamps, anything that might explain where they'd come from. A few had location data embedded. The first one was tagged downtown, a few blocks from the cafe. That made sense. I'd walked that route. The second one, though, wasn't anywhere I recognized. A long string of coordinates. I dropped them into Google Maps. It was a suburb 3 states away, outside Phoenix. I've never been to Arizona. I opened another image, a shot of me from behind, standing at a train station. The metadata said it was taken in Montreal, but I've never owned a passport. I looked closer at the photo, the way I stood, the slant of my shoulders, even the shape of the scar on the back of my arm. It was identical. But the clothes, I didn't own them. I cross-referenced every photo I could find. Some had GPS data, others didn't. One of them was inside a bookstore. I zoomed in. On the table beside me was a book. Hardback, black spine, gold font. I know that book. It's a poetry collection I read in college. I zoomed further. On the inside cover was handwriting. My handwriting, my name, the way I write it when I'm nervous. Sharp R, wide loop on the A. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just my face anymore. It was my history, my handwriting, my posture, my gestures. I checked my bank records, my old notebooks. Even an old email I sent a professor about that same book. I found a scanned PDF attached, a photo of that cover. Same name, same handwriting, different city. I hadn't read that book in 5 years, but somehow someone had placed it in front of me again, in a city I'd never been, in a moment I'd never lived. A part of me wondered if maybe I had gone there, blacked it out, forgotten. But I checked my calendar, my emails. I was working that week, clocked in every day. So how could I be in 2 places at once? Or worse, who else could be living a version of my life without me? I went to the police, filed a report, showed them the images. They took notes, said they'd look into it. I asked about surveillance laws, about AI, about the possibility of deepfakes. The officer shrugged. They can make anyone do anything now, he said. You seen those videos where the president sings pop songs? That was his answer. I asked if I could get a copy of the report. He said, sure, but when I returned the next day, they couldn't find it. They said no one by my name had filed anything. I started researching. It took a while. Most articles were about stolen identities, credit card fraud, catfishing. But eventually I came across a term in a niche cyberpsychology journal, constructed reality stalking. The idea was that certain types of obsessive behavior don't focus on physical contact, but on total replication, not just watching a person, recreating them. Photos, voice, movement. One case study described a man who used AI tools to simulate his ex-partner's life, generating thousands of fake conversations, deepfake images, even AI-generated voice messages he played to himself at night. Another mentioned doppelganger injection, where someone inserts a person into new environments using layered composites, not to humiliate, not to control, but to own. To create a version of you that they can access whenever they want and manipulate at will. I looked through my devices again, scanned for spyware, factory reset my phone, wiped my laptop, deleted all backups. I even bought a burner phone and stopped using apps entirely. But it didn't matter. One night, while I was getting ready for bed, I walked past my desk and saw the glow. My laptop was on. I hadn't touched it in hours. The lid was closed. But now, the screen was lit. Camera active. A video was playing. At first, I thought it was just a reflection. But then I leaned closer. It was me. On screen, I was sitting in a chair, not mine, in a room I didn't recognize. White walls, no windows. I was looking at a screen, not typing, just staring. Then I said softly, "Why did you leave me there?" I reached for the power button, but before I could shut it down, the video looped. Again, my face, my eyes, not quite focused, my mouth moving before sound. "Why did you leave me there?" I forced the laptop closed, unplugged it, took out the battery, left it on the fire escape. But that night, I dreamed of that room, the white walls, the screen, and when I woke up, there was a sticky note on my bathroom mirror. Just one word: stay. Since then, I've moved twice, changed numbers, changed banks, changed the way I write my own name, but every so often I see someone watching me, not from across the street, not from a car, but from a phone. Their hand raised, phone tilted, like they're FaceTiming someone. But when I walk past, their screen is dark, except once. A woman on a train. She wasn't recording, just holding the phone in her lap. I caught a glimpse. It was my face, smiling, wearing a dress I've never owned, in a city I've never been, looking straight at the camera.